Radio Free Santa Clarita presents The Talk of Santa Clarita, a podcast about issues involving Santa Clarita and the surrounding valley. Episode 144, Cenk Uygur, Part 2, The Wrath of Cenk. And now, let's see what the Talk of Santa Clarita is.
And remember, this is for posterity, so be honest.
Cenk Uygur. Do I get it right this time?
Yes, nice job, Steve.
I swear to God, I've been practicing in the mirror, so I'm trying to get it right.
Me too.
The debate we did last week, I in front of 250 people or more, I was screwing your name up left and right. It was really embarrassing.
Look, by the way, never be embarrassed about that.
Yeah, okay.
So it's a hard name, and you know it's funny because you grow up in your own perspective, so it's hard to see outside of it. We talk about this all the time on our show.
Yeah.
So I never quite realized how strange a C pronounced like a J is until I got into my 40s. It was that late.
Really?
And I was like, oh, right. A C is never pronounced as a J in any other language. So it's C-E-N-K, but it's pronounced Cenk, and then it's
I am doing my best to work on that. I'm going to get it eventually. So so I'm breaking a rule by bringing you back so early for a show. And you know why? Do you know why that is?
Why is that?
It's like that Gary Shandling joke, which is, I won't sleep with a woman until she says, oh, okay, I'll sleep with you. You said yes.
But there's a good reason for that, by the way. And first of all, I like rule breakers.
Yeah.
Because people have to know what they're voting on.
Yeah.
I mean, it's elections 101, it's democracy 101. And so I'm happy to do any and all media, any and all debates, because maybe people don't agree with me.
Yeah.
Like, they should find out, hey, which presidential candidate are we for, why, et cetera, like we talked about in the debate the other night. Like, Christy put out a tweet, kind of a cryptic one last night, saying she's listening to Biden. I don't know what that means, right? Okay, I hope you're listening to all of them.
Yeah.
But no one knows which presidential candidate she's in favor of.
Yeah.
It's a classic politician thing to do, like, I don't want to alienate anyone, et cetera, right?
I believe initially she had come out for Kamala. Initially, but I don't know if that's changed since then or not.
Yeah. So I'd like to know, but she never does media, she never does debates, so there's no way of knowing. Wow. But that's why I'm ready to answer all questions, because I'm going to represent you.
You are doing this little dog and pony show, so you are willing to do any media. That is clear.
Yeah. No, I turned down one right-wing website.
Did you?
Yes.
My good friend, my right-wing conservative radio host friend, Joe Messina, would love to meet with you. Is that something?
Well, I'll do that. Yeah.
I'll hook you up then.
Yeah. Hey, I don't mind talking to Republicans at all. I love showing them how wrong they are.
Well, he's also the person that initially wrote the article about Katie Hill and the pictures and stuff like that.
Okay.
Okay. I almost invited you to come in yesterday when I interviewed him, because I thought the fireworks would just be outstanding.
Yeah. But you see, look, so there's a guy that I obviously disagree with completely, not just on the issues about what he did to Katie Hill.
Yeah.
But even so, okay, great, then I'll have an opportunity to challenge him on that.
I'll hook you up, and I'll buy popcorn. So how is the campaign going for you? Is it good? Is it you enjoying it? Good reception most of the places you're going to? Or
it's amazing. It's actually an awesome experience that you might be surprised to find out I would recommend to anyone. Okay. It didn't necessarily start out that way, but no, seriously, I'm hokey, and anybody who watches Young Turks knows I'm the corniest guy in the world. Like, I'm patriotic to the point of almost being jingoistic. We've got the flag in the background in the Young Turks.
Yeah.
I'm an immigrant who came and to this country because we believe in it and we love it, etc. And so meeting people across the entire political spectrum, going door to door, having knocked on hundreds of doors now personally, different racial backgrounds, different socioeconomic backgrounds, and what unites them, what the different issues they care about. It's an amazing process. And so when I ask people to volunteer for me, Cenk2020.com,
get the plug in.
But no, seriously, they come back, and we at the end of the canvassing, we all come back together and we share stories of what we learned and the conversations we had. And almost universally, they say, wow, that was an amazing experience. I'm glad I got a chance to meet and talk to people. Yeah. And I've learned a lot from it, and I love it.
Have you always had such a gregarious personality? I mean, you are a big personality, let's face it. Yeah. And not to say anything bad about any of the other candidates, but you certainly dominated just charisma-wise on the stage last week when we did the debate. I'm just wondering, have you always been like that?
Yeah, yes and no. So... there's two giant asterisks next to my gregarious personality, right?
Right.
One is I'm actually, growing up, I was never like this at home. Yeah. I was the quiet one at home. Yeah. And my sister is 4 years older than me, and she was the talkative one, the rambunctious one, etc. In school, we were the exact opposite. I talked all the time and caused trouble. My sister was really well behaved and quiet. In fact, my dad, when he went to parent-teacher conferences, couldn't believe it. He's like, no, you have them mixed up. Right? No, they're like, no, Cenk won't stop talking. He's like, really, Cenk? He hardly ever says anything. Yeah. And I remember my uncle, I once made a point, I don't remember if I was 12 years old, 10 years old, whatever I was, 14, who knows. Anyway, I remember specifically being in my grandparents' kitchen and my uncle turning to my mom and saying, it turns out the kid's pretty smart. Because I never spoke. I guess they assumed I was a dummy. So, which that's not an assumption you should make about people. Anyway, and the other asterisk is that I was very shy and nervous around girls.
Okay.
And that was a chip on my shoulder, etc. Yeah. But I was confident in other regards. I was confident in school, and I was confident with friends, and I was confident in fighting.
And fighting.
Yeah, like literal fighting. I grew up in Jersey.
Oh, yeah, it's kind of a rule. You kind of expect that. So, I want to ask you a little bit about, I'm not going to hit on the Carpetbagger thing really today, but because the comments, by the way, please do not hate on the host.
You actually made a placard.
Well, yeah, because I got hit a lot about that the last time. And I want to stress to the viewers and everything like that. The reason I was bringing that up is I'm not even from here either. So I think the carpetbagging thing is a stupid idea, to have that. But it is, if you look at the history of this district, there is, it is a factor that people throw at people that have moved in here to run for something. And that's why I was bringing it up, since it was like electability issues. I don't disagree with hardly anything you talk about as far as the issues go. It's more about electability. So, but you did say you were going to be living out here. You're going to move out here soon.
Yep.
Let me ask you a question. Should you lose, you going to stay out here?
Mm-hmm. So it's a fair question, but look, it's basically a job interview. And, And so there's a couple of different ways to think about it. My wife and I have been having these conversations. Yeah. And a point she made is like, let's say you were doing a job interview that we were going to go to Seattle if you got the job. Like an amazing talk show opportunity or something like that. If you didn't get the job, would we still move? And would I have to move my office because she's got an office near where we live, etc.? And we don't have the answers yet to that, but it's a interesting and important family discussion.
Sure. Right? Well, I mean, the reason I bring it up is Brian Caforio was, pointed out as a carpetbagger many times, but he bought a place out here and was living out here. When he lost the election, within 1 month, his house went up for sale, and everybody went, "See, we told you."
Yeah. So no, look, you gotta fight for the folks that live here, right?
Right.
So, and there's been a lot of moving experiences. So when I went to go visit the homeless encampment in Lancaster, every time it gets cold out now, I think about them. Mm-hmm. And because I know that it's like 10 to 15 degrees colder in Lancaster. And having been out there and gotten the mud all over me and seeing them, that they lie on the ground in the desert on the cold hard floor in the tents, that stays with you, man. If it doesn't stay with you, there's something wrong with you.
Right.
And so you got to come back and fight for those people no matter what, win or lose. You got to make sure that you. And luckily, I've got a platform. Even if I lose, I've got a platform where I could help people. So, I mean, you go down the list on all those issues. We covered the Lisa Canyon gas leak.
Lisa Canyon.
Yeah, on the show anyway when it happened, because it was the biggest gas leak in American history. And that's something you got to fight on, and to make sure that stuff like that never happens to anyone.
Yeah.
And so there's all those issues that I'm going to stay on no matter what happens.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm partly glad that you brought up the issue, because I want to say two things about that. One, look, on the one hand, I get it. I don't want to blame people too much, because there's a community, and you want people to be part of that community, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a very natural instinct. On the other hand, I hope that people aren't being too xenophobic, because I have faced that throughout my life.
Sure.
And so whenever you move to a new place, I moved to a new country, when I was 8 years old, and moved from Istanbul, Turkey to New Jersey, moved to California, moved to a lot of different places because I worked in media. And you get it from time to time. And I just don't want it to slip in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I hope people are open to outsiders, and both like physically, literally, but also politically outsiders.
Yeah.
And the second thing is, there's definitely a little bit of hypocrisy here, because Christy brings this up all the time because she thinks it's a winning political point for her. But she backs Kip Mueller, and Kip Mueller's also from outside the district. So do you care about it?
Senate,
he's running for state senate. Do you care about it, or don't you care about it? So if it turns out you're endorsing, supporting, backing, and I got no beef with Kip. I'm just saying, as a general point, if you're saying Carpetbagger is great when the Democratic Party tells me Kip Mueller is the handpicked candidate along with me, and I have to support him, and I do enthusiastically. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to Cenk, it's politically inconvenient for me to support someone outside the district because he's running against me. So now I'm going to pretend that that's a big issue. Mm-hmm. But the fact that she supports Kim Mueller completely eliminates that argument. She is not against people outside the district. She just isn't. It's just a matter of political convenience for her.
I think I can't remember if I specifically asked this question, but I mean, you've never run for anything before, and so I mean, why now? Why did you suddenly just decide to run for Congress, and why not state senate or assembly? I mean, it's certainly California has a more progressive government. You might be able to get more accomplished in a certain sense because of that. I mean, why Congress? Why now?
Yeah, it's a good question. First, let me correct you a little bit. I ran for school president in 9th grade.
Okay.
And got my ass handed to me by Debbie Kirshner.
Okay.
She ran a great campaign.
And she was a carpetbagger too, from what I understand. Yeah.
Well, at the time I was, because I was from outside the country.
Yeah.
But so anyway, Debbie went on to medical school and did great stuff. In terms of why Congress, look, there's super important things that are done at the state level.
Yeah.
And actually, Christy's done some good work at the state level.
She has done some, really. I mean, I think she got 12 bills through in 1 year.
Yeah. Now, she's also got votes that I very much disagree with, and I want to talk about. But credit where credit is due. So the stuff that she got passed, great stuff, okay? So, but to me, the issues are national. They're systemic. Mm-hmm. So, for example, my top issue is money out of politics and the corruption, right? You cannot do that at the state level. You can only chip away at it at the state level. Mm-hmm. But the only way to get it done is to get a permanent solution, is a constitutional amendment.
Right.
And that's only done at the national level. And it's a mixed bag, actually, because I started Wolfpack. That's a group to get money out of politics.
Right. Yeah.
And they believe in the states calling a convention. Mm-hmm. And to propose the amendment that way.
An actual constitutional convention. Which I think is a great idea. It should happen. Absolutely.
Yeah, and they're wonderful fighters for that. They're real people, engineers, veterans, construction guys, etc., who run that organization, 45,000 volunteers. So I love that they're doing that, but we need to move the national conversation. Mm-hmm. And so people think that I'm rude when I bring up corruption and I call it bribes. Yeah. First of all, I think it's more rude to take the bribes than to point out the bribes. Okay. But secondly, it's necessary. I don't, do I mind getting in the ring? No, I don't. You could tell that, right? But at the same time, it's not for that. It's not for that kind of like to have fun. It's actually solve issues. Yeah. Because if you don't move the national conversation in money and politics, you're never going to solve it. So how do you move it? By simply going out and floor the House and saying, guys, when Mitch McConnell takes $1.2 million from the NRA, that's a bribe. That's why we can't vote on federal background checks. When Steve Knight takes $16,000 from Sempra, and then he backs Sempra in Aliso Canyon, well, that's because he got bribed to support the company instead of his voters. It is. It's a bribe. And now every voter actually knows that. Right. But since we have a media blockade and a political blockade on that issue, well, I got to break the blockade, and though you can only do it at the federal level. And so, one last thing about that.
Yeah.
So, what do I mean by a federal blockade? Well, the Republicans don't want to talk about it because at the federal level, they're 100% corrupt. Okay, every one of them takes massive corporate contributions and votes exactly as their donors told them.
Right.
Now, but unfortunately, the Democratic Party, we've got about 75% of the Democratic Party that also takes corporate contributions, and because of that, they unilaterally disarm against Republicans and never point out their corruption. If they're uncorrupted, like for example, if Christy's arguing against Steve Knight, she's not going to point out Sempra because she takes corporate contributions. She's not going to point out his Boeing contributions, which leads to him not cleaning up Simi Valley. Because not only does she take corporate contributions, I'm looking forward to her release on the 31st. She might have taken money from Boeing. I don't know that, right?
Yeah, right.
But it's certainly possible, right? So she's not going to point out his massive, massive corruption, whereas I get to do that. If we clean up the Democratic Party, we'll landslide the Republicans if all we do is point out their corruption and the bribes that they take.
Well, Cenk, let me ask you this. The one thing, Christy is a friend, and I know she's anything but wealthy. I mean, let's face it. You do all right, and you have a network.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. Okay.
Well, I'm trust me, you're better than me. But it seems like you might have a little bit of an advantage. I mean, I think for Christy, what you're condemning, or calling bribes and stuff like that, may be in a certain sense what she needs to just get elected, because in the sense of the way the system is.
Yes.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. And so, look, in a sense, I sympathize with Democrats that are running up against giant money on the Republican Party side.
Right.
And money, unfortunately, buys you a megaphone. And how much money you have controls the size of the megaphone. Yeah. So I get the structural problem that we have.
Right.
On the other hand, it's also used as an excuse. So, for example, they said, well, AOC is never going to beat Crowley because Crowley outspent her 20 to 1.
Yeah.
But you never know until you try. By the way, when I started Just Democrats, there was, I think, only 6 people who didn't take corporate PAC money in all of Congress, including Beto O'Rourke and Ro Khanna. Okay. We made it a litmus test that if you're going to run as a Just Democrat, you have to say no corporate PAC money. Okay. And now AOC won. These are all Just Democrats. Ayanna Pressley, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib. Okay, so they all won. None of them took corporate PAC money. They were in very competitive races in the primaries. Yeah. And they won anyway. And we proved out, it turns out you don't have to take corporate PAC money. And now, this is something I'm really, really proud of. 60 people in Congress don't take corporate PAC money. So it turns out it wasn't as necessary as people thought. But you did have to fight. You did have to prove that you could win without money. And so if Christy says, hey, listen, Cenk, I don't have your national fan base, and so I can't raise the $27 at a time from real people. Right. Well, wait a minute, no. You say you're deeply connected to this community, and this community is ready to back you. Well, then you could get a good amount of money from here, and more importantly, a good amount of volunteers. Yes, right? Because volunteers actually can replace money. Yeah. But I have more volunteers, not just nationally, but in this district, and you could see it every weekend in the canvassing we do all across the district. So you'd be surprised at how well you could do if you actually appeal to the people. And remember, I have to do it is an excuse, but it's worse than that because, guys, even if you say, well, she had to do it, okay, but what are the consequences of that? Because she now owes a lot of corporations favors. And that's just a fact, right? Everybody knows that. So, look, here, let's take an example of a vote she had that was not good in the state assembly. Okay. She voted against rent caps. Okay. So now homelessness is arguably the number one issue in this district, let alone all of LA County. Yeah. When I go to knock on doors, it's the issue most often mentioned. Yeah. Why do we have a homelessness problem, particularly in LA? People make a mistake of thinking it's because of addiction issues and mental health issues. In LA County, that's actually only 42%. It's higher in other places, but in LA County, it's only 42%. 58% is because they can't afford a house. Yeah. I had somebody who's volunteers for me. He has a county job as a social worker and lives out of his car, and he's homeless because he has $84,000 in student loans. Okay, So rent caps is not rent control. It's actually already a compromise bill. So it's actually almost the least we could do for affordable housing.
Right.
And she voted against it. Now, hold on.
Yeah.
Now she's taken over $10,000 from real estate interests. So you might say, hey, I don't know, maybe her family works in real estate and so her income depends on it. That's not a great excuse either. But maybe she just genuinely thinks there's something wrong with rent caps. But now we won't know. Now it's fair for everyone to think, wait, is it because she took over $10,000 that she's voting with the people who gave her the money? Or is she genuinely against that?
Actually, a lot of people, again, your fan base have been watching the last interview I did with her, which, by the way, for the audience, at the time she was in Assembly, running for Assembly unopposed. So I did kind of softball the interview a little bit, admittedly, because she is a friend, and I think she's done a lot in the Assembly. But I did ask her about rent control. And she gave an explanation, a detailed. She likes to base a lot of things on reports and science, as she says, and things like that. But her response was that the problem is it doesn't really solve this homeless problem. She says because, and I'm paraphrasing, but that it is more about once you get rent control someplace, you never leave, and it doesn't allow for the demand for more. If I remember correctly, something about more housing. There's no demand for more housing, and
so two things about that, Stephen. One, that's why we should have a debate, so that I'm not debating her by proxy, right?
Right.
We should have a
debating.
No. I totally. I'm not blaming you for it. I'm just saying, like, it's obvious that we should have an exchange of ideas, which she's been avoiding. Now, in terms of that, that's why I said. Her arguments about rent control are actually interesting, but rent caps are not rent control. It's a hybrid. It's a compromise. It's not, and so I'd love to hear what she actually thinks about rent caps. But again, if you're a voter out there, you can't ever be sure, is she actually against rent caps? Is she right or is she wrong about, I happen to think that rent caps would help in creating affordable housing. Again, one last example. I don't mean to Beto O'Rourke it with anecdotes, but I ran into a teacher in Lancaster. She's African American. She's relatively young. She's got a kid. She's a full-time teacher. Can't afford a $1,200 a month apartment in Lancaster. I had to move back in with her mom. And she said, look, what am I going to do? I'm a full-time teacher. By the way, she gets paid minimum wage. I mean, this is outrageous that we have teachers getting minimum wage, can't afford the housing, etc. So, but it is entirely possible, Stephen, that, first of all, let's acknowledge this. The real estate companies did not give her money for charity. They gave her money to influence her. Everybody knows that. Whether it influenced her is a different question, but it's at least a question in everybody's minds. And if you keep doing that in issue after issue after issue, she took money from Facebook. She voted with Facebook. She owes certain politicians favors that have endorsed her. She votes with those politicians. I can give you more examples of that as we go forward. It is a massive pattern of taking money and voting with the people who gave you the money. So maybe it's all a coincidence. And by the way, it isn't about Christy and it isn't personal. It's systemic. Everybody, as Harvard law professor Larry Lessig, who's the godfather of this movement, says, he said, and by the way, I work with Larry all the time, right? And he's been my biggest mentor in this. He says they lean to the green, and everyone knows it's true. You can't take it, otherwise we don't know if you're representing the voters or the donors.
Well, I feel like the real issue is, I mean, you were talking about this valley, like depending on the base out here and things like that. The Dems out here do not have money. For years, they've never had a competitive race for a Democrat candidate against the Republican because the Republicans had the money, and the Democrats, Lou Vince, who ran, called me, and I worked at a homeless shelter at the time, so you can imagine how desperate he was for cash to call me. And then Brian Conforio comes in, and one of the reasons I threw my support to him initially was because he was able to raise money. Same thing with Katie Hill. It's like the first thing that went through my mind when I met her and everything was, she's from this area, but she also can raise money. Because the last race cost more than $8 million. I mean, so what is somebody supposed to do if their base can't find the money? Right now, it's a situation where...
So two things about that. So, Stephen, number one, then if that is the logic, then folks should obviously support me, because I could raise just as much money, but I'm not beholden to any corporate donors
Right.
or any lobbyists or any politicians. I don't know anybody, anything but the voters.
Right.
So I've now had over 31,000 contributions, over 22,000 individual people that have given me money. Average is $27. Okay, people giving their hard-earned money. Once some troll asked them, "Oh, what are you doing giving your hard-earned money to Cenk?" And this guy had a great answer. He said, "I can't afford not to give it to him because we have got to fix these issues. So if you're worried about raising money, I got that covered. If you're worried about not being beholden to donors, I got that covered. Right. So there's no reason not to vote for me in that case. But if you're saying, well, what could someone like Christy do given that they can't raise the kind of money the Republicans can?"
Yeah.
Here's an alternative history that would have been fascinating. Okay. So now, why didn't people? You mentioned earlier in the podcast, hey, you live a little bit outside the district, and I do, just a little bit, but I do. And Karen Bass is my congressperson,
right? Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So why not just run against her? Because she's a progressive. I actually care about the policies. If I replace a progressive, it's the same vote. It does no good at all. Right. So Christy is a more conservative Democrat. She calls herself centrist, right? I think her votes are far more conservative. Again, we could talk about specifics of that if you want. And so if Christy instead took no corporate donor money and ran as a progressive, and then came on the Young Turks and said, "Help me raise money," you know what we'd done? We'd have helped her raise money. Because we've done it again and again and again for dozens of candidates across the country. You know how much Young Turks raised for progressive Democratic candidates last cycle? $2.5 million.
Wow.
Okay, so keeping this district blue, are you kidding me? That's my bread and butter, is keeping districts blue. And we've done that on an industrial scale. And that's what we do for a living. And if she had gone in that direction, then donors open up that are small donors all across the country, because they're ecstatic when they get someone like AOC who says, "I'm going to fight for you guys and only you guys." Look, you can't win every election. We've given to candidates that didn't wind up winning, right? But we helped a lot of now giant figures win as long as they said, "Hey, I'm going to rely on the grassroots. I'm going to rely on the voters and not the corporations."
You think AOC will get reelected?
Oh, easily. Maybe she might win 90-10.
Do you think Donald Trump's going to get reelected?
No way.
No way?
No. Especially if I win. Okay, now that sounds like... No, seriously. Like, I know that sounds a little haughty, right? So let me explain.
Maybe.
I get that. Okay, so... But here's why. Look, a normal person wins a Congress. They go to the back bench. Okay, and they owe favors to all the Democrats who endorse them, etc. And all those Democrats say, "Well, you owe me, so you're going to sit in line behind me." So she's the very last person on the totem pole. Okay, or he, whoever it happens to be, right? Me, I don't know any of those guys' favors, so I don't care about what they say, and I'm not going to the back of the line, and I'm not going to let them take this district to the back of the line. Okay? So, but how does that affect Trump? Well, then I've got a national platform and a mic in the floor of the House that they can't take away. So I go there and I say, "Look, I gave a challenge to Donald Trump. I think his grades are miserable."
Yeah, I love this.
I know it for a fact that he's hiding his grades from college and even high school. He's threatened to sue anyone who would show the public his miserable grades. Okay, and I went to the same school as he did, college. We went to Wharton, except I earned it. And his daddy got him in. I don't know if it was the same doctor who wrote the Bone Spurs letter. And so he's been hiding his grades. And I said, "Look, I'll give you $1 million that I don't have, but we'll figure out a way to get it to you." And my God, the MAGA guys hate me. Oh, if Trump took $1 million from me and bankrupted me, it would be their dream come true. So come on, Donald, take my money, bankrupt me, right? All you got to do is show that you had better grades than I did. Right? And he won't. So now you say, that sounds fun, but what does that have to do with him winning or losing? Because Trump's problem isn't that he's a monster. Unfortunately for a lot of the voters, that's not the bug, that's the feature. When they see him attacking Latinos and Muslims and African Americans and women, they love that. So, God, that's so frustrating to the rest of us, but it is a reality. What would undercut him and cause him to lose is if they thought their beloved strong leader was actually a weakling, a spoiled little brat, an insecure little guy with thin skin.
I think that's pretty evident now, don't you think?
No. Our reporters go and interview people at Trump rallies. They think he's a giant. They think he's so strong.
Yeah.
They don't know about his 6 bankruptcies.
Yeah.
They don't know that he hides his grades. They don't know that he's a dummy. They think he's smart. So if you have a national conversation about how dumb he is, it undercuts his strength. Then he's got nothing left.
Yeah.
And I would go on and I would challenge him on TV, on anywhere that I could. And as a U.S. congressman, anybody will have you on TV talking about Trump. And you say, look, the guy had 6 bankruptcies.
Yeah.
And so you've got to be honest with people. He's a miserable failure as a businessman. Yeah. He's a miserable failure as a manager. You undercut those strengths, he's already on the ropes. People, they underestimated him last time. I did not make that mistake. I said on national television that he would win. I said, watch out. He's running as a populist. He can win. This time they're overestimating him. He's deeply unpopular. All you got to do is knock out his legs on the idea that he's strong and smart. Obviously, he's the exact opposite, and it's easy to prove, and he's toast.
Okay, this podcast here, this episode was prompted by you and I talking on the cell recently, and I guess my question for you is this: do you consider yourself a cynic or an optimist about this country?
Oh, I'm a massive optimist, to the great frustration of my co-host.
See, this is where you and I divide, because I am a cynic. I want to believe in the ability of the people to move mountains.
Yeah.
But when I look at what I see in the country right now, the gerrymandering, the pushing through by Mitch McConnell to put all these conservative judges on that are going to be there for life. And I think about the fact that Mitch McConnell won't put bills that the Congress has passed, that the House has passed, up for a vote. And I look at Donald Trump, who won by the Electoral College, which is not really democratic when you think about it. I just feel like we've already had a coup. You know what I mean? It's been more subtle.
Yeah.
So to me, it's almost like I feel like giving up at this point. So So when you talk about your ideas, I go, okay, Medicare for all, that's great. Green New Deal, that's great. But it's not going to happen because of where the government is right now.
No way. We're going to win.
How is that going to happen?
Let me explain. We had an office opening in Palmdale this past Saturday.
Right.
And I gave a speech about hope. And hope is real. And it's not just because I'm an optimist by nature. Optimism is actually rational and supported by the facts. So let me give you facts to back that up. Women wanted a constitutional amendment to get the right to vote.
Right.
But that's just flat out impossible.
Because
they can't vote. How could you possibly get the right to vote when you can't vote, let alone an amendment which requires 2/3 of Congress to propose 3/4 of the states to confirm, right? Impossible. From the first day that they went out to do street protests. The movement was much longer than that, but from the day that they did the protests in the streets, it only took 7 years to get the amendment. Okay. And the first time they went out, though, the cynics were right. They got spat on, they got pushed around, they got shoved, and it was deeply embarrassing. But what courage, Jesus, what courage, right? And it turns out, if you try, you can move mountains, and they did. And so they had no chance at all, and they did the impossible. It's actually, for us to do the things that we're talking about here, is nothing compared to what the women's rights movement did to get that amendment so women can vote. And that was only 100 years ago.
Yeah.
I'll give you a second example.
Okay.
Civil rights movement. Now everybody knows about Selma and Martin Luther King and John Lewis, and those are giants, and I hope that John Lewis gets well soon. He's an absolute legend.
Yeah.
But you might not know about the 4 African-American kids in North Carolina that decided on their own, you know what, it's not fair that we have segregation at the local Woolworth. I want to be able to sit at the counter too.
Right.
And so they knew the dangers, and it's North Carolina back in the day, right, in the 1960s.
Yeah.
They were actually not connected to any of the other groups, not to the NAACP, not to any of the other groups. They just psyched themselves up. They went and sat at the whites-only counter. They got hot coffee thrown at them. They were attacked by the people in the restaurant.
Yeah.
And then it turned night. They would not move. It turned night, and the Klan showed up.
Yeah.
So what we do in comparison is nothing compared to the giants that preceded us. And they all won, Stephen. They all won. We won the revolution and got rid of the monarchy. We won civil rights movement. We won against slavery. And yes, God damn it takes way too long, way too often. But we always win. We always win. Conservatives are the losers of history. They're the they're the Washington Generals to our Harlem Globetrotters, because they are destined to lose. Why? Why? Because they are opposed to change, and change always comes. So we're going to win. There's no question about it. The only thing is we've got to try. Last thing on this, Ryan Graham wrote a great book. He's a great reporter for The Intercept. And it focused on the progressive movement and talked a lot about AOC and how she won. Got the title of the book from AOC. She once said, "They've got money, we've got people," and the book is called "We've Got People." And he explains that the thing that Mitch McConnell fears most is a popular uprising. So if there are people show up in the Senate, he like protesters, he makes it his personal mission to make sure that they lose. Why? Because he knows if we all rise up together, he's toast. And his corporate donors are toast, and his power is toast. So that is my mission. Go into the House, and by the way, it's not their house, it's your house. I'm going to invite the public into the House. Come watch our debates, come watch our discussions, hold your Congress people accountable. Then we're going to go to the Senate, and we're going to watch there. McConnell's gotten away with all this, the Republican Party's gotten away with all this, because no one's watching. Well, we're going to watch them, and we're going to hold them accountable, and then anything is possible. And, I'm sorry, I know I keep going, but it's such an important issue.
You're a wordy guy.
Yeah, okay, but it's such an important issue, and I want people to understand the theory of change, how we actually get the change, and how it's practical and pragmatic. So, again, I seem rude when I call out other Democrats, but it has a purpose. The purpose is, if you keep taking drug company money and insurance company money, we're never going to have Medicare for all. But if I shame you into stopping the donations, if we get the money out of politics, we'll have Medicare for all the next day. Because it's a no-brainer. It's the only thing that gives you universal health care coverage. It costs less. It saves average American $12,000 a year. It's a no-brainer if it wasn't for the corruption. Well, you call out the corruption, you end the corruption, you get Medicare for all.
Yeah, but the thing about Medicare for all is, I think Rick Wilson was on The Daily Show last night, a Republican strategist who anti-Trumper, and he talks about, if you talk Medicare for all, Republicans find the thing about it that they're going to distort to scare the crap out of people.
Nah, it's Rick Wilson. Rick Wilson's a Republican,
well, I
so
know,
I don't give a damn what he thinks.
Well, I know, but he's telling you the strategy that's going to. My mother, who still lives in Kentucky, God love her, she's already doing the talking points of why is the Democratic Party already moving to the left so much?
Yeah, I know.
And what this Medicare for all thing? How are we going to pay for it and everything that? They're hearing this through the Middle America, not through in California, the most progressive state in the country. Middle America hears these things and gets scared, like I'm going to lose my doctor.
Well, they're wrong. Yeah. So let me explain how we got here and then how we can fix it.
Okay.
I'll make it as quick as I can.
Okay.
So first of all, the Republicans are against it. So when the first Medicare for All poll came out, the Republican voters were not against it.
Yeah.
It had a 70% approval rating, which is stunning.
Yeah.
And 51% of Republican voters said, yes, I want Medicare for all.
Yeah.
That's amazing, right?
Yeah.
So in the meanwhile, what happened was we spent a year on the election. The Republicans attacked it. The insurance companies and the drug companies spent money against it, advertising in Iowa, New Hampshire, other places.
Yeah.
But most importantly, the corporate Democrats like Biden and Buttigieg came in, and Buttigieg switched from being for Medicare for all to being against it after he went into a wine cave and his donors told him, "You're not going to get the money."
Not a fan of Mayor Pete.
Okay, yeah. And so there's no question he switched his mind after talking to the donors. Okay, so they then spent a giant amount of money doing propaganda against Medicare for all, and the corporate media hates it. And why do they hate it? Did you see that debate last night?
I watched most of it, yeah.
Drug company ad after drug company ad. They love money in politics because the $6 billion the politicians spend, most of it goes into TV. It's their bread and butter.
But see, I feel like you can't fight that message.
I can fight it, and I'm going to fight it, and I'm going to win.
Okay.
So now, when I went on Chris Cuomo's program on CNN, he does that standard talking point shtick on Medicare for all. And I said, no, wait, Chris, you're wrong, and it is indisputable. So first of all, they keep saying it takes your private insurance away.
Yeah.
But they never finish the sentence. And it replaces it with better insurance, with expanded coverage where you do not pay co-pays, premiums, or deductibles. Now, when you don't say the second part of the sentence, you're actively, purposely lying to the American people. So when I go on TV and I say, wait, doesn't it give you better insurance? They're forced to say, well, yes, it does give you better insurance. Then they switch over to how are we going to pay for it. I go, wait a minute. Now, every other developed nation has a version of Medicare for all, and on average, this is a fact, it costs half of what our system pays. So my question to you is, how are we going to pay for this current system? This current system costs twice as much. Fact. The money is going to insurance company executives, it's going to marketing, it's going to politicians, it's going to all these things. We have the facts on our side. We just have to have the courage to fight and to point out those facts and insist that the media do it. But we can't do it when we have our own side undermining us. So there's another giant difference between me and Christy. She's against Medicare for all. Well, look, if you only do a public option, it's not choice. You have to do a copay, premium, and deductible. You have not changed the system at all. That is not universal health care. 45,000 people a year die because they don't have insurance. I mean, imagine if we didn't have public fire departments. If we had private fire insurance.
Oh, yeah. I've thrown this argument out at people like Joe Messina, And as a matter of fact, Joe is a devout Christian, and I've always asked him, it always strikes me as interesting that he's against Medicare for all, but, he says he's a devout Christian. It's like, isn't that the most, if you're a really religious person, isn't that the idea that everybody should have a doctor,
100%.
You know what I mean?
Jesus Christ fed the poor and healed the sick.
Yeah.
And they would have called Jesus Christ not a socialist, but a communist. Okay, Jesus obsessed about the homeless, the poor, the needy, the sick, the downtrodden. In fact, he said, give away all of your worldly possessions to help the poor and the homeless and the needy. So now, look, to finish that thought, though, what's amazing is we actually in this country did used to have private fire insurance.
Right.
And guess what? We ended it fairly quickly because if it turns out you don't put out the fire in that house because they didn't have insurance, not only do they burn to death, but the fire spreads, which is also the case in a lot of illnesses. The illnesses spread. So you've got to put out the fire. Now imagine if we stuck with that old system and we let 45,000 people a year burn to death because they didn't have private fire insurance. The country would be outraged. We would be livid. But that's exactly what we do when we let 45,000 people die because they don't have insurance. If your kid gets cancer and you're actually hit worse if you're middle class. You can't afford the insurance. We as a society say, since you're not rich enough to have insurance, we're going to let your kid die. Wow.
Not right.
Wow.
I agree with you on that.
We have got to have universal health care coverage, and the only thing that gets it to you is Medicare for all. Stephen, you're not wrong to be concerned about the propaganda. I ran into a lovely woman knocking doors in Simi Valley. She's 80 years old. She has add-on insurance, Kaiser. She obviously has Medicare, right? And she's 100% progressive. Agrees with us on everything. But they've got her worried that we're going to take her Kaiser away. And she's like, I like my Kaiser. Don't take it away.
Right.
I'm like, no. They're not taking it away. Medicare for all actually would improve Medicare. You would have expanded coverage. You would have more than you have under Kaiser. And you'd have dental and vision and prescription drugs. And yes, believe it or not, it is cheaper because we've seen it 1,000 times in other countries. It is definitely less expensive. There's no question about it. Every study, including the Koch brothers study, confirms it's less expensive.
Well, let me ask you a question. I love the spirit, the idea that you're going to fight, and that's what you said the last podcast. I'm going to fight for you. I'm going to get I'm going to call out Mitch McConnell and all this other stuff. But say Amy Klobuchar puts forth a public option. It gets passed through the Senate and goes to the House. And then it looks like that's all that's going to happen. Would you support the public option? Would you compromise on some level to get something done?
Yeah. So that's a great question because it leads to the past and the future. So sometimes people say, they criticize me for not only voting for Hillary Clinton, some progressives do, but enthusiastically supporting her during the general election. And I did a video saying you've got to vote for Hillary Clinton because you don't know if you live in a blue state or not. Pennsylvania is within 3 points. Do not make any assumptions. Trump is a monster. We cannot have him win. Okay. So But that starts the question at the wrong time period. The best time to fight is in primaries. Okay, so that you don't have what some people described as the lesser of two evils. I didn't necessarily agree with that framing. Trump is monstrous. Hillary Clinton is wrong on some issues, in my opinion, but not evil. That's ridiculous.
No.
Okay, so now, so that's why if we had gone with Bernie Sanders as who I support in the primaries, the polls showed he had a 12-point lead on Donald Trump. We would have been more likely to win. You can't guarantee anything, but we would have been more likely to win, not less likely to win. And he would have fought for you on all those issues, and he didn't take corporate donors, etc. So the correct answer is you support Bernie Sanders in the primary, in my opinion. Okay. Then if he loses, then you don't have a choice. Then you've got to support Hillary Clinton over Donald Trump, because even if you think it's the lesser of two evils, it's still a no-brainer. Okay, I don't like Ted Cruz, but if it's Ted Cruz versus Stalin, I'm going to vote for Cruz, right? And it's going to be
Stalin has a better mustache.
Well, all right. Nonetheless,
okay.
And it's going to be the most painful vote of my life, right?
Right.
I'm going to hate myself for a week, but it's a no-brainer. So when we talk about the public option versus Medicare for all, if you ask me after the debate is over and this is the last day, are you voting for public option or not? That's a different question, right? And I'll get back to that question. But the right thing to do is to start the fight now, so we're not forced into that wrong question.
In other words,
those wrong choices.
The attitude of, well, he already said that he would, concede to a public option. And so
that's right. So Christy says she doesn't even want Medicare for all. Again, that's not, so no universal health care coverage. She wants public option. Well, by the way, that's also the wrong political strategy, because if you go to the Republicans and you start with a public option, they'll whittle you down to something less.
I think that was Obama's biggest mistake, was not fighting for Medicare for all.
In fact,
and he might have gotten a public option at least out of it.
Exactly what I said at the time, Stephen. And I said, then when it got to the public option, I said, look, there's a lot that I love about Obama, but when he basically said it's optional, and Christy now says for those who want it, it sounds a little optional. I'm like, that means he's giving it away. He's not going to do the public option. So in that context, the public option was the best we could get. So I fought like hell for public option. And then Lieberman screwed us in the Senate. And Obama could have broken him. Obama could have went and said, I'm going to campaign in Connecticut. It'll be the last vote you ever have. You're going to betray all Democrats like they said you would, etc. But he didn't. He didn't fight on it, so we lost the public option. Now here we are over a decade later, and now they're saying maybe we could have the public option now. No. If you fight, you win. History shows that. Facts show that. So we're going to fight for Medicare for all, and we're going to get Medicare for all. If you have a vote at the very, very end, and there is no other choices, then you make the right choice. That's easy.
Would you support Nancy Pelosi to stay as Speaker?
No way. No.
Not at all?
No chance. They would have to come up with the worst Hobson's choice of all time, where it's
Stalin.
No, I wouldn't go that far. She's not Ted Cruz. You don't have to go to the Stalin example on that. No, I disagree with her policy, and I disagree with the money that she takes and the people she serves. She's not a bad person. Okay, so. They could do a situation where, oh my God, Cenk, you're the last vote, and if it's not for that vote, the Republican's going to take it, or the even more conservative Democrat's going to take the position. I suppose that it has a 1% chance of happening, but more likely, at a minimum, I will abstain. But I will try to find a progressive to run against her. I will support the progressive 100%. Because she says, she bragged to the New York Times recently, Pelosi did, I have raised $728 million in campaign contributions. And the Democratic Party's like, oh, hooray for Nancy Pelosi. We talked about it earlier. They think they have to do it, etc. But honestly, that's $728 million in bribes. So someone who has her source of power in a wine cave, okay.
Going back to that wine cave.
Yeah. It's symbolic, but it's true. By the way, she's literally been in that wine cave many times. Okay,
I want to go to a wine cave.
Stephen, don't get me wrong. It sounds lovely. Yeah, if you like wine caves, I don't have a problem with you. I just don't want our government run out of wine caves.
Okay, right.
So then she owes all those people, and then she enforces that on the rest of the Democratic Party. So if you're Christy and you got an endorsement from Pelosi, you cannot defy her. That's the way politics works.
But Cenk, the cynical side of me says, okay, so you defy Pelosi, okay? Now she's going to start putting people on committees. She's going to put you in charge of eggs on farming, instead of something like, the military or the Judiciary Committee or whatever.
That's right. Yeah.
So, I mean, you're going to end up marooned in some kind of small... is that?
Yeah, I've thought that through. So there's two ways to handle that. First of all, I'm not a standard politician. I don't lie to people. So I'm not going to tell you, oh, no, I'll get the best committees. They'll just magically just want to give me good committee assignments after I've criticized the leadership of the Democratic Party. No, I get that dynamic, right? So then how do you get beyond that dynamic?
Right, okay.
So there's two methods here. Number one, the minute I go in, I would say, I demand to have the same exact committee assignments as Katie Hill. Mm-hmm. That is this district's committee assignments. No ands, ifs, or buts. If you say no, what you're saying is, I'm going to punish your district because I hate progressives. Because there's no other reason.
Right.
Because, you're saying, okay, it's the same district, the same voters, the same dynamic, but since you guys elected a progressive, I am raising my hand as the leader of the Democratic Party saying I don't like my own voters. Mm-hmm. Because the Democratic Party is not the conservative party. We're the progressive party. Yeah. We're not a corporate party. We're not supposed to be a corporate party. We're the progressive party.
When did this
We're
happen?
the left-wing party.
When did this happen?
I have a great story. Ralph Nader told it to me. I'm going to tell you exactly when it happened. That's super interesting. Right. I'm glad you asked.
Okay.
But to finish up the committee assignments.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah. So then that puts Pelosi in a situation where she either has to admit, yeah, I'm not left-wing, I'm not progressive, and I like to punish progressives. Mm-hmm. Or you give me the same committee assignments Katie Hill had and go, oh, no, I'm not discriminating, right? Mm-hmm. So that has a pretty good chance of working. It still might not work.
It might not.
Right. So, but you can concede that at least it's a good plan.
It's a feasible plan.
It's a feasible plan.
I'll give you that.
Right. Number two is, after that, you go and you vote, or organize a progressive caucus, and then every once in a while you vote no. Okay, so I would have voted no on the drug bill. It was a terrible bill. It was a Trojan horse meant to protect the drug companies, not to fight against them. Okay. And if you block the vote, then you know what you have? Power.
Okay.
So then when you have power, then you go, okay, now are we having a conversation about committee assignments? And I guarantee you the answer is yes. Because they're practical, they're pragmatic, they know how to deal with power. If you don't have any power, you're out of luck. But if you do have power and you can block votes, if you mean it, do not block votes for the sake of power. You only do it if you mean it, right? Mm-hmm. But there's a lot that I disagree with Pelosi on, and I think there's a lot that we can block votes on that helps corporations and that doesn't help voters. Then you have negotiation and leverage power. See, that's practical, that's pragmatic, instead of saying, okay, I'll go up to the back of the bench, I'll give you whatever, I'll take whatever you give me, and I can't ever defy you. If they ever want to get reelected, the people who do take the endorsements from Pelosi, Feinstein, etc., they have to listen to their orders, otherwise they cut off the money, and then they can't get reelected. Yeah. So you don't want your congressperson restricted by the whims of not only other politicians, but politicians that don't live in this district,
right,
and that don't care about this district. They care about their own districts and their own power. Do not take orders from them. That is why you shouldn't take endorsements. Now,
what happened to the Democratic Party?
Democratic Party. So I interviewed Ralph Nader several times, and one time, it's actually off air this one time, I asked him, look, you were running roughshod. The Nader's Raiders were amazing. People forget this, how strong progressives were in this country. Mm-hmm. They got Richard Nixon to establish the Environmental Protection Agency. Wow.
That's pretty amazing, yeah.
Nixon is like a little bit right of Attila the Hun, and he's the one who started the EPA. Why? Because he was afraid of Nader's Raiders. Mm-hmm. He was afraid of Ralph Nader. That world seems unimaginable to us today, but if you have a real democracy, that is the world that exists, because progressives are a majority of this country. Mm-hmm. You've been lied to by not only the Republican Party, but the corporate media and some portion of the Democratic Party. We are 60% of this country, progressives. Okay, I could show you the polling to back that up. All right, now, they also got Nixon to do OSHA, to protect workers, okay, the safety of workers. Yeah. So I said to him a very logical question, what the hell happened? Because you went from a lion that has got Richard Nixon kneeling at your feet to running into a brick wall, and now after that you're irrelevant and nobody ever listens to you. And he said, Tony Coelho happened. What?
I have no idea who that is.
Right, and at the time I didn't either. So he said, Cenk, look him up. In 1978, Tony Coelho was the head of the DCCC, and like Sherry Bustos is today. And he went and told all the other Democrats, now we can take corporate money too. And once they started taking that corporate money, it was all over. Progressives lost all power in this country.
Wow.
And so that was, I had the same exact reaction. Wow. So I did go and look it up. And I said, so what the hell happened in 1978 that made Coelho realize they could now take corporate money? Mm-hmm. And it turns out the answer is 2 Supreme Court decisions. Citizens United shot a dead horse. I shot it real good. Okay.
I know these decisions. I can't think about. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
So in 1976, Buckley v. Vallejo.
Right. Okay.
The Supreme Court said money is speech. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
And so they had already decided in the 1880s, kind of. You should listen to Tom Hartman on this. He's a great expert on it. The Supreme Court in a decision that they didn't even make, their clerk made. I don't want to get into this long story. Yeah. It was a great injustice, one of the worst Supreme Court decisions ever, had said that corporations have the same rights as human beings. Mm-hmm. They were the equivalent of people, which is outrageous. Yeah. But once Buckley v. Vallejo said money is speech, they said since corporations are people, they have speech rights, which equals giving money to politicians. And in Bellotti in 1978, they said yes, they confirmed corporations can give money to political groups. And so the PACs begin, and we are done. It's Pac-Man after that. They just gobble us up. It's just, they run roughshod. So after 78, corporations can give money to politicians, not necessarily directly, but they can give through PACs, then they develop into super PACs, and then they develop into dark money, and they buy off our entire government. You mentioned a coup earlier. Yeah. That's the coup. It was a corporate coup against our government. In fact, Lewis Powell in 1971 wrote a memo saying, on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce when he was a lawyer there, and he said, we should take over the government. And one of the things that business can do to take over the government is take over the Supreme Court. Nixon, while he's getting his ass handed to him by Nader, sees that memo and goes, ooh, I like that. And he puts Powell on the Supreme Court. Powell is the deciding judge in Buckley v. Vallejo and Bellotti. Okay? Yeah. So that's Nixon's revenge. Is this corporate coup that took over, most importantly, the Democratic Party. Yeah. And we've had no change and no progress since then. That's why you've got to get the corporate money out of politics.
Okay. Now, I want to ask you about a couple other things here. Particularly, like, I love the idea of the Green New Deal. Mm-hmm. I talked to Katie about it when she had just started Congress, and she wouldn't come out for it. Mm-hmm. Her feeling was that it would hurt small businesses. I mean, I know it's not an actual law itself, but I mean, how do you respond to that? Yeah. I mean, I came back with saying the ADA didn't hurt small businesses necessarily. It might have dinged them a little bit, but they were able to come back from it. But I don't know. I mean, the Green New Deal seems a much bigger idea that might really inflict something on small businesses. What do you say to that?
So I totally disagree. So look, standard politician thing, Katie Hill's popular here would be to say, I support Katie and everything she says. No, I'm not a standard politician. I'm not going to lie to you. Okay. Yeah. So I think Katie's wrong about that. And so why? Green New Deal actually creates millions of new jobs. Okay. And it's not an exaggeration, because what you do is you rebuild the entire energy infrastructure of the country. Mm-hmm. So this is what Eisenhower did back in the 1950s. Yeah. He built the original infrastructure of the country, the highways, the bridges, the roads, etc. Right? Right. And what did it do? It created a ton of jobs to build the infrastructure, but then it created way more jobs once you had the infrastructure in place, and you could do trucking across the country, bring goods. It increased business dramatically. Right. Okay? If you rebuild the energy infrastructure, it creates an enormous amount of high-paying jobs. First of all, in this district, it's a no-brainer. It's inarguable. The Antelope Valley will have so many more high-paying jobs because of solar and wind power. Right. So you should do it across the country. But the 25th district has got to fight for it 1,000,000,000%. Right. It's going to it's going to help their economy and small businesses. And look, I run a small business. I started one in my living room 18 years ago. I have about 70 people that work for me full-time now, 85 if you include contractors. I've seen all the troubles of small business. When I talk to Republicans and independents or small business owners in this district, I could relate to them. I talk to them about the regulations. I talk to them about workman's comp. I talk to them about all these different things. And small business needs protection when it is nascent. When it is under 50 people, for example, some of the same rules that apply to Walmart should not apply to small businesses. Right now we have it backwards. Because of all the corporate contributions, the giant businesses like Walmart get government subsidies, get extra help that small business doesn't get, and they use it to drive small business out of business. Okay?
Right,
So in reality, it should be the reverse. Small business should have protections because it's in the community, it creates more jobs, and I can go on and on. Green New Deal would definitely help a ton of small businesses throughout the country, not just because of the infrastructure, but because of all the things that flow from the infrastructure.
We didn't, in a certain sense, didn't we see some of that a little bit when Clinton came into office, because he started putting more environmental restrictions. There was more requirements for more energy compliant devices and stuff like that helped boom the economy. I mean, that was one of the reasons I became more of a progressive Democrat, was based on what I saw with Clinton doing, to the economy and things. And, you wanted to talk a little bit about homelessness in general. I mean, are you talking about California specifically, or across the nation? And
we touched on it before, but let me go into more detail. So again, when I knock on doors here, it doesn't matter if it's Santa Clarita or Palmdale or Lancaster or anywhere in between. Homelessness comes up over and over again. First of all, good news on one part. You get some folks who are mean spirited, and they'll say, I don't want these people here. We should round them up. I've heard that, right? Yeah. And you'll see a lot of that on TV. So you might assume that that's the majority. It isn't. And I wasn't sure, but I was really pleasantly surprised to see a lot of people saying we got to help those folks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in Lancaster, you got Rex Parris, who says we shouldn't feed people who are unhoused. Almost everyone in Lancaster, when I knock on their doors, goes, no, you got to let us feed them. That's crazy. We got to help our fellow men. Because a lot of good church-going folks, right, saying, what are we doing? No, that's crazy. Rex Parris talked about you should arm yourself in case you get into a conflict with a homeless person. Jesus Christ, what are you talking about, right? Is that what Jesus would have done?
He obviously doesn't know homeless people.
Yeah.
I worked for a shelter for 12 years, and my experience with homeless people was enlightening as far as, and they were teenagers, most of them, and it was shocking, finding out how good these people are and how desperate they are just for an opportunity. That's
right. That's 100% right. Almost everyone I talked to at the encampment had a job, lost a job, dying to get another job, dying to get a roof over their heads, so they're not freezing out there. So how do we address this? It's very, very hard. This one does not have a lot of easy solutions, but there are solutions. First of all, we've actually passed good measures. You've got Triple H, you've got Measure H, and so we've allocated a lot of money to address homelessness.
But they're saying that Measure H has been kind of a disaster as far as the amount of money that's being spent per.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then the problem is, here we go again, corruption. So you take money from real estate interests, politicians do. This is not Christy. I mean, she does as well, but I'm not referring to her when I say this. Right. But the mayor, other Democrats, etc., they take money from real estate interests, and all of a sudden the money gets spent on, housing, and some portion of it is on affordable housing, but most of it isn't.
Yeah.
Well, it's not funny. Or people connected to politicians wind up getting fat contracts for construction, for real estate, etc. And everybody who's a donor is helped, but damn it, we didn't fix the homelessness problem. So let me give you an example, a little bit of hope here, getting back to optimism, are there things that do work? Yes. Utah, over a decade ago, had a novel idea. They said, you know what we should do with our homeless? How about we build homes?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this is amazing.
That's right.
Most people don't know about it, or the conservative movement fights against it. But I'm sorry, I'm telling your story.
No, it's okay, but you're right. You're right. So I remember covering it on the show and thinking, well, that's not going to work, is it? It can't be that simple.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's a complicated problem. That sounds too simplistic. No, totally worked. In a decade, homelessness in Utah dropped by 91%.
It's cheaper too, isn't it?
Oh, and of course it's cheaper. And so people then get skeptical about that. Let me explain why it's cheaper. Because if people are out in the streets, they have a lot more ailments, then they have to go to the emergency room. and they don't have insurance. An emergency room costs a ton of money, and then the taxpayers pick up the bill. Not only they'll get sick way more if they're in the streets than if they're in a home. And the other thing is a lot of people treat homelessness with cops. It's totally wrong strategy, and also really expensive.
Yeah.
Because if you bring them into jail, first of all, they can't pay fines. So there's an absurdity of like a $500 fine to a homeless person. Yeah. How the hell is he supposed to pay?
He's going to stay in jail, and there he's got a bed.
Exactly. He's got a bed. He's going to stay in jail, and that costs us a ton of money. Take that money, in fact, less of it, and build the homes.
Yeah.
But you can't. You got to have uncorrupted politicians, because you give the politicians this big chunk of money to build homes, and at the end of the day, we'd be lucky to have 10,000 homes built in Los Angeles, and we already have 59,000 homeless people. So it's not enough. It's not enough because it gets diverted, it gets too expensive, etc. There are ways to fix this, but so here's another reason why it'd be. I was going to say, great to have me in Congress.
Let's not be shy.
Yeah. No, but seriously, look, if you're a U.S. congressman and you don't have to worry about any of these political interests in any of those donors, I can go to, not just at the federal level, but I can go to the mayor, I can go to anybody and go, give me your budget. What are they going to say, no to a U.S. congressman?
Yeah.
No, I want to see the budget. I want to see who got the contracts.
Yeah.
What was their profit margin on those contracts?
Right.
How many homes were built? What could you have done instead? Okay, then we're going to have real accountability.
Okay. Yeah, and I just, to top all that off, it has been proven by a lot of studies that it's better to do the housing first than deal with the issue of a job or whatever, because, once that immediate issue is taken care of, they can focus on the issues of like mental health, disease, and job placement and everything else. So it's just a practical, common sense solution to
100%. Like, so if you haven't worked with homeless folks before, it just might not occur to you. It's not your fault. But the number one, I don't know about number one, but one of the top things that they need is a shower.
Yeah.
And it might not occur to you, right?
Yeah.
But they need a shower so they can get a job.
It's one of those things. It's like, how do you, someone says, well, why don't they get a job? Well, if they're worried about where they're going to sleep at night, who's going to wake them up? Get them to school, where are they going to get a shower? To even get to the job itself. And even job, employers look at it and go, you're homeless? How can I hire you? It's astounding the stigma that exists with homelessness, and this is a personal issue with me.
100%,
because I work in a shelter. So, I want to ask you a little bit about just criminal justice reform, and because I know you want to talk about that a little bit. Then I want to have some fun for about 5 minutes, and so we'll wrap up.
Yeah. So, look. We have to fundamentally change the system here, and a lot of folks say, "Oh no, here we go again, too progressive, too far left." But no, it's just a matter of simple justice. So number one, we've already done it in California, although people like Feinstein fought against it tooth and nail. Yeah. But you have to legalize marijuana. Otherwise, we fill up the jails with people for the equivalent of having a beer. Now you go to the shops that sell marijuana, it's grandmas and aunts and uncles, etc. Yeah. It's not scary. It was never scary. The war on drugs was always a lie, right?
They're done by DuPont, right? Wasn't it DuPont because the... if I remember correctly, hemp was cheaper for paper, and DuPont had just come up with a chemical for making paper from wood pulp. Yeah. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's part of the story. Yeah. And then Nixon wrote a memo where they said if we make sure marijuana is illegal, that way we could arrest or drugs overall in their crazy racist mind. And this is in the memo. Nixon didn't write it. Nixon received it. It was within his administration. That way we'll get to arrest African Americans and we'll get to arrest liberal hippies, they wrote. Okay, so it was always political. So when I see Democrats like Biden and Feinstein fighting on the wrong side of that issue and that imprison millions of our fellow Americans on that injustice, it drives me crazy. But there's other issues, ending cash bail. So we said, wait a minute, now if somebody did a crime, I don't know that I want them out right away. That's why we have bail. But do you know that the rich can get out right away? In fact, they can get out right away if they do a murder versus you doing jaywalking, because they have the money for the bail and you don't have the money. So then we're not imprisoning you based on the severity of the crime or the alleged crime in that case. We're imprisoning you because you don't have the money. That's debtor's prison in a sense, right? So there's all of these fixes that are fundamental that lead to what? Freedom. Republicans talk about freedom, they never actually deliver it. So now, unfortunately, Christy's been really bad on this issue on a lot of different ways. So number one, there was a bill in the state assembly where they do facial recognition software on the cops' body cams, and Democrats wanted to get rid of that, which is great. Yeah. So when credit where credit is due, Democratic Party heading in the right direction there. I love it. Okay, Christy voted no. But wait a minute. If you study that issue at all, African Americans and interestingly Asian Americans are misidentified at a rate that is 100 times the rate of whites.
Wow.
So what does that lead to? It leads to black people getting arrested over and over and over again that are false arrests. So there's in my mind, there's no justification for that. But Christy leans towards quote unquote law enforcement. But wait a minute, what kind of law enforcement? Law enforcement to keep us safe, or law enforcement to wrongly imprison African Americans, right? Then you go to, and she also voted to not allow felons on juries. But wait a minute, they did their time.
I would agree with that,
Yeah, as Democrats, we want them to be able to vote because they already served their time. It's a matter of justice.
They served their time. They should be treated like a regular citizen.
Absolutely. And a lot of them were wrongly imprisoned on marijuana charges in the first place, right? On possession charges, etc.
Yeah.
And you've got to let them on juries. She voted no. Why? Why are you doing that? See, when I say she's a conservative Democrat, that's what I mean by that. And then this goes further. She endorsed Jackie Lacey. So the DA in LA.
Yeah, I know about Jackie Lacey.
So Jackie Lacey's put, even though California has a moratorium on death penalty, she put 22 people on death row anyway. All 22 are people of color. Okay, over 400 people have been shot by police in LA County since Jackie Lacey's been the DA. She only prosecuted one person, one police officer, and that person was a person of color. Okay, all the others let go. Ed Buck, my God, he has killed several African-American LGBTQ members in his house, but Jackie Lacey not only did not prosecute him in the beginning, she took money from Ed Buck after one of the murders.
Jesus.
This is what I'm talking about when I say corruption. Christy didn't have to endorse Jackie Lacey. I don't think Jackie Lacey even endorsed Christy. Christy went out of her way for no reason to go endorse Jackie Lacey.
Yeah.
Probably the most conservative Democrat we've ever had in LA. Black Lives Matter is livid with Jackie Lacey. The ACLU says that what she's done is an unbelievable injustice. And so why is Christy for no reason at all backing Jackie Lacey and endorsing her? So this idea of, you know why, you know the answer.
Yeah.
There's a lot of cops in Simi Valley. There's a lot of cops in this district. So she's playing politics. Oh, I'm going to be the conservative Democrat that's pro-law enforcement. No. There's a right way to be pro-law enforcement that serves the whole community. Like, for example, the NRA blocks a prohibition on cop killer bullets.
Right.
Those are armor-piercing bullets. Not on my watch. That is insane. Again, if I'm on the floor of the House, I say, look, every Republican that votes against this bill hates cops and doesn't mind them being shot. It's a fact. It's a fact. The only reason you would have armor-piercing bullets is to kill and murder police officers.
Yeah. I agree with that,
there's no debate about it. Yet the Republicans are saying, oh, blue lives matter. Then they turn around and say, oh, I don't mind if you kill cops, as long as the NRA makes an extra buck. Yeah. So there's a right way to be pro-law enforcement, but not at the expense of the community. Yeah. And she's done that over and over again. We have to have real criminal justice reform. That's what progressives are in favor of. That's what I'm in favor of.
All right, let's have some fun.
Okay, before we get to fun, I just got to say one last thing that's serious. Okay,
right,
and I owe you a joke, by the way. So I got you.
You owe me a joke, and I've got some other questions.
Yeah.
Some fun stuff.
Okay. So speaking of bad endorsements, why did Christy endorse Susan Christopher for her seat? So she says, I want to keep this seat blue, and I care a lot about it, and I care about this community, and we turned the 38th district blue, right, the state assembly. She's leaving now. She says, well, I cared a lot about it, but I'm going to leave to run for higher office. Okay, fine. People run for higher office. I get it, right? So she backs Susan Christopher. It turns out Susan Christopher is a Republican last year. So, and not only that, she maxed out. She gave her $9,400. So wait a minute, I thought you wanted to keep the district blue. Now that got so embarrassing that the Democratic Party must have asked Susan Christopher to drop out because they found out she's a Republican. And so now Susan Christopher has dropped out. But Christy backed her and maxed out to her. So when I see her telling people she wants to keep this district blue, well, she's got a funny way of showing it. Yeah. And maybe that's why she never does media. Maybe that's why she never does debates. Because why in the world did you give $9,400 to a Republican for your seat? For your seat. That's completely outrageous.
All right. This is my, as we've done before in the show, my 8-year-old son Ryan has a question for you. And I'm raising him to be a good Democrat. So
good.
His question is...
Are Republicans the bad guys? Do you hate Republicans?
Oh, I love your kids' questions. Okay. So it does require a nuanced answer. So,
all right.
Number one, do I hate Republican voters? No. Do I hate Republican? Are the Republican politicians bad guys?
Yes.
Yes, definitely. I'll explain in a second. Do I hate Republicans? No. Hate's too strong a word. And by the way, I get worked up, and sometimes it might slip out. Right? Okay. But no, because it's never personal. Even for guys like Ted Cruz, well, with Trump it's a little personal. Okay. Yeah. Right. But no, the reason that the Republicans have become the bad guys is because they're basically saying, we don't care about principles, we don't care about our voters, we will do whatever it takes to serve our donors. So whereas I'm worried about corruption in the Democratic Party and it affects some significant percentage of the Democratic Party, it is systemic in the Republican Party. They are 100% corrupt at the federal level. Good news, by the way, at the local level throughout the country, Wolfpack has found a lot of Republican legislators at the state level who also want to get money out, who actually are not corrupted. And the Koch brothers sometimes spend money to defeat Republicans at the state level, and that's created a dynamic where a lot of Republicans are now going, oh, wait, didn't we want to get Soros money out? And now I got the Koch brothers spending money against me, or I got ExxonMobil spending money against me. Maybe I do support this movement. That's part of the reason why we can win. Okay? And Republican voters are actually great on corruption. They agree that the system is corrupt just as much as Democrats do, even a little bit more. So we can serve Republican voters. And if I win, I'm not going to hold the Republican politicians' crimes against the Republican voters. Then you serve everyone. So whether Republican voters are like it or not, I'm going to get them higher wages. I'm going to get them more jobs. I'm going to get health care for their families. We're going to fix the planet so their kids and their grandkids are okay. Whether they like it or not, we're actually going to help them. But Republican politicians are a different story. I got no use for them. My job is to beat them.
All right. What's the name of the guy that we talked about wrestling last time? What's the head of the guy, Victor, the head of the WWF?
Vince McMahon.
Vince McMahon, that's it. Quick question for you. Vince McMahon versus Donald Trump. Who should win in a real fight?
Oh, Vince McMahon, easily.
All right.
So, look, Vince McMahon's a pretty bad guy himself. I mean, the way he's treated his workers is outrageous and it endangers their lives, etc. But Trump has all of that, plus the hatred against women, plus the sexual assaults, plus starting wars, plus 1,000 other things. But if you're talking about who's going to win in a fight, Vince McMahon has been in the ring a lot of times. Trump's a coward through and through. Mr. Commander Bone Spurs. One of my favorite things was when a reporter asked him, hey, which foot did you have the bone spurs in? Right?
Yeah.
And he said, maybe both. You didn't have bone spurs, you coward.
You remember Saturday morning stuff. Godzilla versus Ultraman.
No, I don't know Ultraman much.
You don't know Ultraman?
No, I know.
Do your research.
No, I watch Super Friends, I love the Super Friends. Now my kids got me hooked on Marvel and the Marvel comic universe. But sight unseen, I'll go Godzilla.
Okay, I would probably do that. What's your favorite movie?
Oh, so I got a bunch. Dead Poets Society.
Really?
Number one.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because Robin Williams is great in that movie, and that character is absolutely right.
Yeah.
You've got to seize the day.
Yeah.
We're all going to die.
Yeah.
And we talk about this on the show sometimes. It sounds a little macabre, but it's not. Death gives life meaning. So we all have a certain number of days that we live in the world, and that's a scary thought. Everybody's got a number. But this day matters just as much as the last day.
Yeah.
So one of my favorite songs is an old folk song called "Oh Death."
Oh, yeah. Caper Van Beethoven did a cover of it. Great song.
Yeah, and it's a guy negotiating with the Grim Reaper. And he's like, just give me one more day. I'll give you this. I'll give you that. I'll give you all my worldly possessions.
Yeah.
And the Grim Reaper says, it's not how it works.
Yeah.
Your time is up. Okay? Yeah. So you've got to seize the day. You've got to enjoy every single day. And now this is really weird and funny, but I feel like rich people have a bigger obligation. Okay? For those of you who have money, my God, so many of us don't. Okay, I spent 15 years as a starving talk show host where I couldn't buy a Snapple because it cost 99 cents. Right? So you've got a responsibility to enjoy the money. Hopefully you'll also spread it and help others, etc. But at least soak it in, for God's sake. Yeah. So I love Dead Poets Society. And then, just because I'm corny, I love Braveheart and Gladiator.
Braveheart's great. I love Braveheart. Yeah, and talking about just seizing the day, I think I think we talked about Star Trek last time, but there's a great quote in one of the stories about the three greatest words in the world are "Let me help," during the day, and I think that's should Speed Racer have worn a seatbelt?
Well, Nader would definitely say yes. So look, it's just quick on Nader to turn it slightly serious for a second. Yeah. So Nader cost Gore the election. That's true. Okay, there's just no way around it. And I yelled at him on air about it, etc. Although Gore actually won that election, it was a long story. But anyway, people are too tough on Nader because he got us seatbelts. On seatbelts alone, let alone everything else he did, let alone EPA, let alone OSHA, let alone all that stuff. He saved millions of lives. By getting us seatbelts. Yeah. So when progressives fight and when they are lions and they win, they save lives.
You owe me a joke.
Yes. Okay. So I was embarrassed last time that I didn't think of one because me and my son, who's 9 years old, we go through these all the time.
Right.
And I told him at dinner, he's like, Baba, what are you doing? How could you not have a joke? Remember, we looked him up on Siri. So I got a Siri one because it's his favorite.
All right.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
A terrible burglar.
Terrible burglar who?
Oh, no, I've already said too much.
Wonderful. I give you that one. So, well, Cenk, I wish you much luck in the election. Thank you again for coming on the show again. I hope we'll see you again on the show. And, check out the Young Turks if you want to.
And so, look, in this context, please, everybody, Cenk2020.com. Yeah. Because sure, if you can give a dollar helps to reach another voter, reach with our progressive democratic message. Yeah. We've got to reach not only democratic voters but independents. When I knock on doors with independents, we win them over 100% of the time. Yeah. Okay, they hate the corruption. Okay, but more importantly, come join us. Okay, we got wonderful people from this district who canvass every single weekend and on the weekdays. We have, I think, 68 canvases ready to go.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah. So we believe in people power. So please come out. You can go to Cenk2020.com/team to become a volunteer, or Cenk2020.com/events to see canvases and phone banks in your neighborhoods. Castaic, Porter Ranch, Simi Valley, Antelope Valley, you name it. We've got a canvas there. So come fight for democracy with us. We get the money out, we'll get our democracy back. And when you participate in it, it feels fantastic. So I can't recommend it highly enough.
Well, I can't give you $1, but I did give you this cool hat, so you can keep you in the sun. No, thank you, Duke, very much for coming on the show.
I appreciate it, Stephen. Thank you.
And we hope you guys enjoyed the talk.
You've been listening to The Talk of Santa Clarita. Listen to us on iTunes, SoundCloud.com, YouTube, and Stitcher. Barring a life event getting in the way, a new podcast is available every Tuesday. Questions, comments, and show ideas can be sent to thetalkofsantaclarita@gmail.com. You can also call or text us at 661-505-8672. That's 661-505-8672. Follow us on Twitter at The Talk of SC, or on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at The Talk of Santa Clarita. You can also visit our website by going to www.thetalkofsantaclarita.com. This has been a production of Radio Free Santa Clarita Incorporated. a 501c3 nonprofit organization. To donate, go to radiofreesantaclarita.org/donate. Radio Free Santa Clarita, on the net and on the air, and we're very much aware.
Any questions?